the world. We call it reframing. Somewhere around 1990, Republican think tanks invested millions and millions of dollars into helping people actually before that, in the 80s, reframing how we talk about politics, how we talk about decision making. They're really, really good at it. Democrats are starting to catch up. But Republicans were really good at helping capture the frame of a conversation. And so this is a mindful communication technique. This is a way of understanding what it is that we're thinking when we're actually speaking. So like, if I want to change your mind, I can use a threat, right? That's one effective way, short-term effective way of changing your mind. Compost or die, you know? And that, I believe, if we don't compost, in fact, if we don't cycle things in Mother Nature, we will all die. But to threaten someone to say compost or die is, depending on the source of power that I use, may or may not be terribly effective. It's meant to be a joke. The question we had in the discussion group last week was, how do you talk to your parents about some of your core ideas? And my proposal to you is not to argue with your parents about your core ideas unless they're asking you. But your parents' friends might be someone, when they ask you, why are you studying sustainable food and farming? Why do you believe, why do you buy organic? It costs more. Why do you care about Mother Earth? Why do you care about things that are not affecting you? You might want to have a way of talking about that that's more effective than, well, it's what I believe and you're all wrong, and go into the attack mode, which is what we all do. How do you talk with your parents? So this comes from George Lakoff. He's a cognitive psychologist, I believe in Berkeley. He wrote a book called Don't Think of an Elephant. And this is the example that he uses for helping us reframe a conversation. This was a book he actually wrote for progressive think tanks in the Democratic Party during the Clinton administration, who became more effective at talking about some of their principles and some of their ideas. Prior to that, Ronald Reagan was called the great communicator, partly because he was so schooled and guided in this reframing technique. And so he would name things like trying to cut taxes for the rich, which we're going through again right now, of course, but Reagan was the first one, and he called it tax relief. And so it's really hard to be against tax relief, because he created a frame called tax relief, and then he provided lower taxes for the rich in order to create this trickle-down thing so everyone would get well. And that was the idea. And he was really effective at claiming the frame and creating, sharing his way of thinking. So first, to understand the reframing technique, I'm going to ask you not to think of an elephant. Don't think of an elephant. Please don't think of an elephant. But now think of a trunk. So by telling you not to think of an elephant, was that the trunk that you thought of? Some of you might have, particularly if you're way into trees. Was that the trunk you thought of? More than likely, oh, that's annoying. More than likely, that was the trunk you thought of, right? Because I told you not to think of an elephant. By telling you not to think of an elephant, by denying you a particular vision, you took on that vision, perhaps, and created a frame in which the word trunk triggered, perhaps, the idea of an elephant's trunk. The frame creates the context for the conversation. And so every word that we use creates a particular frame. And every word can have power. And if those words are shared, they can have shared power. The frame, the word trunk, is set in the context of elephant, and even negating the frame. I told you not to think of the elephant. But of course, you thought of the elephant, and therefore, the elephant's trunk. So I created a frame. I tried to create a frame that we call the elephant's trunk. This creates an elephant frame. Don't think of an elephant, creates an elephant frame. You might be able to change the frame, however, not by telling you not to think of an elephant, but to ask you to think of something else. This is a baobab tree. It's known in some parts of Africa as a survival tree because, did you know the baobab the tree can live for hundreds of years? Because it contains water within the trunk. And so if you're thirsty, you can extract water from that trunk and survive. Now, if that was the story I told you prior to the elephant story, you might have thought of a different trunk. What I can perhaps try to do, as trying to be someone who wants to share some ideas, now think of a trunk, what I could try to do is shift the frame. What I cannot do is tell you, don't think of the elephant. It's not going to be effective because you're going to be stuck on the elephant. To do this technique, to use this technique, we start with mental models. And this is what Forrest was talking about turning the iceberg upside down. I came to learn about this in 1985, perhaps. I was doing a radio show. I used to work at the University of Illinois, and I was doing a radio show. And somebody was interviewing me, you know, and it was very polite and very nice. This is part of the homework. You know, he was asking me, you know, my job, my background, all this stuff, and he was being very nice to me. And I was talking about sustainable agriculture. And he then asked me the question, so why do you hate American farmers? In 1985, sustainability was a new thing, and it felt like an attack on the American farming system. And so he asked me, why do you hate American farmers? And I was totally flabbergasted, because he had set me up. He had been really nice to me, engaging, respectful, and then he asked me a question that I didn't know how to answer. And my answer was, I negated the frame. I said, well, I don't hate American farmers. And I lost the conversation in that moment. Because as soon as I accepted the frame of the conversation is, I hate American farmers. Denying it would do no good. Richard Nixon was very famous by proclaiming, I am not a crook. As soon as he claimed, I am not a crook, everyone looked at him as if he was a crook. He was negating the frame, but he created and reinforced the frame by negating it. So saying that I don't hate American farmers, I lost that conversation. So I'm going to shift I'm going to shift the frame by talking about mental models. I'm going to speak from the heart. I'm going to reestablish a new frame. And from that, I'm then going to talk about structures, patterns of behavior, and I'm going to then tell a story that's an example of the mental model. This is the proposed framework that I carry around in my head. It's an upside-down iceberg. To start with beliefs, move to structures, share patterns and hopeful stories, and then propose an action. This is taking the iceberg and turning it upside down. This is something that I learned from Joanna Macy. Joanna Macy, who wrote the Three Stories essay. She uses these techniques for helping to tell her story. And what I saw in her lessons was I saw an upside-down iceberg. She was talking about shifting the pattern of speech, and what I saw was an iceberg. So I carry this iceberg around in my head when I'm under attack from someone. So, for example, Uncle Fred at dinner from Thanksgiving says, I understand you're studying sustainable food and farming at UMass. And Uncle Fred says, who's kind of obnoxious, you know, I joined a food co-op back when I was in college. After I graduated, however, I had to join the real world. You ever hear that one? I had to join the real world. You live in this fake world called UMass. You're being privileged, right? It's an attack. I can't really afford all of that organic stuff today. You don't understand, when you have a job, you have to pay in your way, and they always kind of laughs, ha, ha, ha. You know, there's always kind of this self-conscious laugh because he knows he just attacked you in front of your mom and dad, who's his brother, and, you know. Anyway, so you got attacked at Thanksgiving dinner, right? This happens, right? They're laughing at you because they don't understand. Many of you have families that have no idea why you're studying sustainable food and farming. This is crazy. And what happens? I take a deep breath. What's going on here? What do I want? And I respond. So I didn't know you were a member of a food co-op. I'm going to give him something. I'm going to give Fred something. I'm going to create a relationship with Fred. What I'm really doing is focusing on my parents, but I'm talking to Fred. I didn't know you were a member of a food co-op. How cool, you know? Then you understand why I'm so concerned about how food is grown today and how much harm it can cause the current system. So I'm sending my parents and everybody else at the dinner table a message, but this is something I deeply care about. And I'm using old Fred. I think we can do better. This is a really good quote. Remember this if you remember nothing else. When they attack you for not being an idealist, I think we can do better is not a defensive response. It's not you're wrong, you're an idiot, you're destroying the earth. It's I think we can do better is a way of accepting and hearing the message, and at the same time saying, there's another way of thinking about this. I think we can do better. I believe that when I have a need sitting at Thanksgiving dinner someday, I'll be talking about the Great Turning. Now I got him. Because what? You know, I got the what statement. And even if Fred's now pissed off and totally shut down and not listening to me, Mom and Dad are going, what's going on? What's this Great Turning? And now I got a chance, you know? Now I got a chance. Yep, the Great Turning is what we're living through today. It's the inevitable shift from an industrial growth society, industrial growth at all costs, you know, to a life-sustaining society. I am not able to talk about the Great Turning unless I recapture the frame. If I say, you know, no, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you know, I'm right and you're... I've lost. If I can recapture the frame with something that has common values. I didn't know you worked at a food co-op. How cool, then you understand that, why I'm so concerned. I have a chance now to tell my story. And then we talk about structures. The big idea of the mental models, the patterns of behavior, lots of us are involved in food co-ops. We'll talk about how these things are working. You know, at UMass, we're part of the Real Food Challenge. We have a student farm at a farmer's market. We have lots of classes focused on sustainability. These are examples of the things that are happening at this place, you know. There's lots of structures that reinforce this idea of the Great Turning, you know. Structures like organizations. Did you know there's an organization called Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture in the Pioneer Valley? It's been going on for 20 years that helps encourage use of local foods. Did you know that there's policies at national levels that encourage the honest use of Organic Standards Act? That is, you can no longer lie about whether your product is organic because there's ways of measuring. Did you know that we have at our university a ritual, a motto called Yes Farms, Yes Food? And I get to talk about this idea. If I talk about organizations, policies, and rituals, these are structures, semi-permanent things that exist in my world that reinforce the idea of the Great Turning. Now I'm not so crazy. Yeah, okay, they're only at UMass, and maybe they don't exist in Newton, Massachusetts. Maybe they do. But these are things that are happening. These are structures. These represent patterns of behavior. Did you know that while less than 1% of American ag products in the U.S. are sold directly from farmers to consumers? You know it's like 10 times higher than that in the Pioneer Valley? Do you know that things are shifting in some parts of the world? Pioneer Valley, Eugene, Oregon, Santa Cruz, California. There's pockets of shift that represent this Great Turning, and I'm part of that. And that's why I do what I do. We're all part of this Great Turning. And then I'll tell a story. So I've gone from the mental models of, you know, I truly care about the food system. I know it feeds us, but I think we can do better. To the patterns of behavior. There's lots of things happening in my world, you know. There's student farms, there's earth foods. There's those structures that reinforce all these things. There's CISA, there's the Real Food Challenge. There's things that are happening in my life. And you know what? It's got this really cool farm down the road from where I go to school. Then I get to tell a story about a farm, a real story, and perhaps even suggest an action. The action might be, let's go down a simple guess. Let's look at the new farmer's market down there. Let's just see what they have for sale. Did you know that farm was 40 acres of corn and squash? It was rented out by Mr. Jakanowski, who was getting on in years. Did you know as he was getting older, he was offered $1.7 million for that piece of property by a developer who was going to develop condominiums? Do you know that Mr. Jakanowski, he and his family sold that to a community group, a group of neighbors that bought that property at a significant discount and promised to keep it in farming for $1.3 million. The Jakanowski family took a $400,000 loss to keep that family, that piece of ground in farming. Did you know that community group then just got local monies? They contributed money. They got local monies. They got money from the state, from the town, in order to keep that property in farming. That property now, that about 20 acres of farmable ground, is permanently protected. It has to be farmed forever by state law. That's a structure that will keep that farm in business. Do you know that farm allows training for people like us? You know, that provides apprenticeships for people like us. You know that many of the apprentices are now farming on their own. This is a story that reinforces the patterns that are built into structures that are based in the mental model of why I work in sustainable food and farming. I did not respond to the attack from Uncle Fred saying, that organic food's too expensive. I told my own story. If I respond to the attack, I lose. And this is what I'm going to ask you to do, is reframe a story, reframe the attack. Framing's got to be real. It's got to be honest in my world. Ronald Reagan was really good at this, but eventually his stories got unraveled because they were not true. There's a basic premise that all dictators eventually will collapse when they're not telling the truth. And there's lots of examples in histories of people who gain immediate power. As Jack said, you can use this power over method to control your neighbors. Eventually, it all unravels. It's got to be honest. You've got to start with common values. If I share values at the Thanksgiving table that nobody buys into, I'm not going to be able to establish my frame. I've got to find common values. If you talk about personal stuff, did you know my grandfather lost his farm in the 30s because of pressures from the outside, from cheaper food coming in from New Jersey. That's something that people can relate to. And you've got to find a way of connecting to the listener. It's all based on mental models. And stories makes it work. So I buy local. Response from many people is that one person buying local can't really make a difference. You know, this is quite often the response we get. I buy local. I can actually afford to shop at Simple Gifts, so I feel it's a responsibility I have. Many of you can't afford to shop at Simple Gifts on a regular basis. You probably can't afford to go down there and buy one item and get to know the farmers and hang out there on a Saturday for their porch jams and listen to the music. One person can't make a difference is a very, very powerful mental model. And what we have to do, I believe what we have to do is question it. Is that true? Is one person not able to make a difference? So here we have the typical response from one person can't make a difference. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. You're not going to make any money. This is the voice of cynicism. The voice of cynicism is endemic in human society today. It's very, very powerful. It's the voice of cynicism, destructiveness, irresponsibility. I believe is really powerful. Now, if I am attacked by that voice of cynicism that just came from, from one person over here, you know, that voice of cynicism. If I'm attacked, if I say no, that's not true, and I'm reinforcing the frame. I'm saying don't think of it. No, it's not cynical. It's not destructive. I lose. What I can do, however, is try to replace that voice of cynicism with a different voice. With a voice of hope, with a voice of responsibility, fairness, and community. By pushing the good stuff in, I push the crap out, you know? If I try to fight the crap is providing the frame. If I try to fight the elephant frame with don't think of an elephant, I lose. If I fight the elephant frame by putting it, did you know a baobab tree can save people's lives? They last for hundreds of years. I can push a new image in, a new frame in, and again, reestablish the frame in my voice. Out with the old, in with the new is what we do. We start with the beliefs. We push the old frame out. We start with a new frame based on our values, based on on things that we truly care about, and we try to then have a space big enough to tell our own story. Reframing is a very, very powerful tool. It can be used in a manipulative way if you lie. It can be used in a very powerful way if you tell your story. What I'm going to ask you to do in the homework assignment for Thursday is simply to try it. Try it out and see what you learn.